I think the other mistake people might make is to consider America as one market. I'd argue it's not. I'd argue the states are so different, both from a mentality perspective, but also we underestimate how different it is to have to register in each state and have to, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a straightforward one either. So I think, taking chunks of that is a very sensible approach, and focus your efforts on where you want to go. America is not one thing. It's the United States for a reason.
Welcome to the H-Files, the new series of the Hands-On Business podcast, where we dive deep into the world of healthcare leadership and the unique challenges facing small to medium-sized healthcare businesses. I'm Hakeem Adebiyi, and after years of helping businesses grow in various industries, I'm excited to focus on the area that I know the best, healthcare, one of the most dynamic and impactful sectors in the world today. In this series, we're going to explore what it takes to lead and grow in healthcare, from navigating the complexities of regulation and innovation to overcoming the everyday hurdles of building a sustainable business in this fast-paced environment. Each episode will feature real-world insights, expert interviews, and actionable strategies that can help you push your healthcare business forward. So whether you're a leader in the space or an entrepreneur ready to break into it, the H-Files is here to give you the edge. One of the most common things I hear from healthcare businesses looking to scale is we want to go to America. And I get it. It's the biggest healthcare market in the world. It's filled with opportunities. But just because it's big doesn't mean it should be your first step. Because the US market, while being big, is also complex. It's regulated. It's fiercely competitive. So there's some challenges there. And without the right strategy, even the best healthcare businesses can struggle to break through. And that's why I'm really excited to have Angela Spang on the show today. Angela is an award-winning healthcare entrepreneur and innovator. She's founder of Dune Medical, which is an award-winning global medical device company specializing in surgical solutions. Offices in the USA, so we're going to be talking about that, the UK and Sweden. And she's won International Trade Business of the Year 2024, most inspirational and influential woman in business to look out for in 2023, UK CEO of the Year 2021, and also Dune Medical has won the Queen's Award for Enterprise for Innovation for the Medical Device Galaxy 2. And there's obviously loads more I could go on, but we could be here all day, so I'll stop there. And so, Angela's got a background in innovation, international business development, and a proven track record in scaling companies across borders, and knows firsthand what it takes to succeed, and therefore what pitfalls to avoid. And in fact, Angela is exactly who I want to be when I grow up, actually, if I put it like that. And in this episode, Angela is going to be sharing some lessons from her journey into the US healthcare market. So whether you're considering expansion or just want to understand what it really takes to get into the US, I'm hoping this is going to be a conversation which is packed with valuable insight. So welcome, Angela. Thanks for coming on to the show.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. So kick off. If you had one piece of advice for anyone trying to make it big in their field in healthcare, what would that be? I know that's a broad question, but I like to start broad and then narrow in.
Well, thank you, first of all, for that introduction. That was mind-blowing. I was wondering who else you were going to invite to the show, because I just really saw one problem after another, and that's sort of how I got here. I think your question is a great one. What is the one thing that is the most important one when you want to grow and scale your business? And I think it's understanding how the business has to change from those early days when you start inventing something to where you have to put measures and steps in place to actually grow a business, because it is very easy to grow too fast if you're lucky, or it's very easy to not grow at all. And obviously both come with their certain challenges. The one for me, I think, is making sure that when you set out to start any business, is that you have an exit plan, a clear exit plan. And I don't mean the one where you sail off into the sunset on your yacht to the Bahamas. I mean the one where you say enough is enough, and now I'm tagging out. It's one that I find that most growth plans are actually missing, which is sad, because you can always start another company or invent another product, but you can't rescue your house, your family, yourself if it's gone on too far, which is a somber note to start on, but I think one good to remember maybe.
So when you say exit plan, you're talking about If it's not going well, or if it's going, yeah.
Correct.
So if it's not going well,
If
where
it's
you
not
say,
going well, yeah, it's very easy to talk about what we're going to do if it goes well, right? We're gonna list, we're gonna sell out, we're gonna do all those things. Those are nice things to think about. I think it's harder to think about what do you do if it doesn't work the way you planned. Where do you and how do you change it from a failure to part of your strategic plan? When is it just a choice you make instead of you folding your business and failing? And that's a difference in attitude, I think, to making that part of your plan. I've always had a very clear line in the sand where I've said that if we get to this point, and we don't have to go into what my particulars look like, but if we get to this point, I'm pulling back, I'm pulling out. And I certainly had that for the US market, because to your point, it is a beast.
it is, and I think that's a really good place on where to start, actually, because I think you're right. Everybody thinks about, oh, I'm going to sell out in 3 to 5 years. I'm going to get multi-million dollars, and I'll be on the beach, and and actually, sometimes it happens like that, but often it doesn't. And I think, especially when I've seen people try to get into America as their first port of call, the road to America is littered with lots of UK companies who have just crashed and burned. But the worst thing about it is they spend a shed load of money because they're going over there, they're getting distributors, they're going themselves, and it's not a cheap market to get into. So I think that's a really valuable point to start on. You need to know when you can say, actually, this isn't working. Actually,
Yeah, and you need to know why you're going there as well. Is it because of your ego? Is it because it looks good? Is it because you've heard that's the right thing to do? Is it because you want the attention? Is it because you're looking for the sales? Or are you just looking for the profitability? Because that has certainly changed a lot in medtech, where the golden rule used to be that everything in America is 2 and 3 times as expensive as the selling price in mainland Europe. But that has also changed with the introduction of bigger buying groups, of a more conjoint efforts in buying and bringing the prices down. So I think from that perspective, the US market looks very different today than it did 10, 15, even 5 years ago, for sure. So you got to have a really good understanding, I think, of what it is you want to accomplish with the US market, and therefore tailor your strategy accordingly.
no, and again, that's yet another valuable point, because I think most of the companies I talk to want to get into the US because it's big and it's shiny.
Yes.
They haven't looked at the effort, they haven't looked at the return on investment, they haven't looked at what revenues they're trying to deliver. Because a lot of the time you can deliver, if let's say, for example, you want to just, I'm a lifestyle business, I want to turn over 2 million. You can do that in other markets, which are a lot easier to get into. And I think that people think, oh, well, if I get into the US, then I can show everybody I've made it, and then I'm going to be much more attractive to acquirers because I can say I've broken into the US. So I think it is important to actually really have a strategic mindset as what is it you're doing and what are the steps that are going to get you to where you want to go, rather than just saying, America, I need to get to the US, which is, I mean, honestly, the amount of people who say it to me every single time, can you help me getting you into the US? Yeah, I can. But why do you want to get into the US?
What's your purpose and what's your goal? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think the other mistake people might make is to consider America as one market. I'd argue it's not. I'd argue the states are so different, both from a mentality perspective, but also we underestimate how different it is to have to register in each state and have to, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a straightforward one either. So I think, taking chunks of that is a very sensible approach, and focus your efforts on where you want to go. America is not one thing, it's the United States for a reason. One could argue they're not that united anymore, but let's not bring politics into this.
Yeah, that's a whole different discussion. But yeah, I mean, I go to the US a lot, and that as you just said, that's a conversation I often have with people, because they say, "Oh, I need to get a national distributor." I said, "Well, yeah, you could get one, but you do need to understand that working in New York is not the same as working in California or Texas. There's lots of different regulations and laws and different things that you need to understand. So if you think you're gonna land in New York and all of a sudden everybody in the whole of the US is now going to be using your products, I said it's not that simple, and you need to understand the challenge that you have if you want to bite off the US. And I would always say, and you need some cash. You need a lot of it.
Do need a lot of cash. I find that the cost of just purely doing business operating is a difference. And I'm not talking about the cost of electricity or similar, right? It's just a different ballgame altogether. Simple things like going to an exhibition. It's eye-watering. Sell your grandma and you might get a lunch ticket, right?
Yeah.
Depends on if your grandma gets a good price, but it's an entirely different ballgame. The other part of it, I think, is challenging for me being Swedish, because there is a trend. Whilst there is an appreciation of growth and entrepreneurism and business success, there's also a transactional approach to most things. If you pay me, I will do this for you.
Yeah.
And that to me is quite uncomfortable, to be frank. I'm being Swedish. It is unthinkable for me to pay anyone to use my product, for example. It just doesn't resonate with me at all. So that part, I've just taken a very straight line, but I can do that because I own the business and I get to make my own decisions. But it's not an easy one where you're desperate to get product used, and influencers is, the word of the month. But to me, I've just stayed away from that. I will never pay anyone to use my product. It doesn't matter who they are and what they want to, or what they can do for me. I will not pay for influencers in the medtech space, because to me, it's illegal and I don't do that. In any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter what it is. So I just don't. But I think other than that, it can be a really tricky space, because, you could argue that getting your product on Grey's Anatomy would be the greatest thing that happened in medtech. And I completely sit there and watch Grey's Anatomy at every retractor and going, oh, I wish that was my galaxy. That looks clumsy. They surely could have done that better with, more lightweight, more modern design. But, so whilst I can feel that personally, I just don't. The cost of doing business in the US is inflated in all sorts of ways. And it doesn't matter if it's your local accountant or if it's your registrations or whatever. Hey, don't talk to me about IP, right? Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you said it, because when I first started doing some work in the US, I remember fortunately, I've got quite a few contacts in hospitals, and I spoke to somebody about a product, and I said, "Oh, could you just speak to somebody about, if they'd like to look at it?" Oh, yeah. He came back. Yeah, he said he would. He said that he'll charge you £1,000 a month to. I said, I just want him to look at it.
Yes.
I was like, what?
Exactly. No, we don't do that.
Exactly. I said, yeah, thank you. Tell him thanks, but no thanks. Because obviously in the UK, that and other markets, that doesn't happen. But so it was like, to me, it was like my mind was blown. I'm thinking, hang on, I just want you to look at it. This is going to be a benefit to you.
Yes.
And you're telling me that you're not even going to look at it unless I put you on some kind of retainer to pay you. I thought, yeah, thanks very much, but no thanks.
Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle to get your head around, isn't it? But at the same time, if we're coming from and I think this is where the cultural difference, even between two English-speaking countries, is quite large.
Yes.
In social medicine, that is unheard of. But for an American surgeon, they don't make money unless they are operating, unless they are doing something. That is how it works, right? So often when I have the conversations of saying that a UK surgeon is paid the same whether he or she operates 0 cases one day or 10, and they go, they're what? They can't quite get their head around the fact that there is a salary coming out whether you are productive or not. And that's a fundamental difference, I think, in how we review time, and how we manage our downtime for whatever case that might be, or type that might be. It drives productivity and efficiency in ways we don't even consider here. We think about adding post-operative notes. How do you do that in the most efficient way? Well, I don't have to be efficient. It's going to be an hour until my next OR case is ready because of turnover. That's not how it works in the US. It's a different driver altogether. And it requires different things from your product. Whilst I can talk about, the environmental impact that the less material has in my product in the UK, it is irrelevant in the US. They don't care. To them, it is hugely important that the product is ready to be used at a moment of open. It can be used in the OR now. There's no wait, there's no sterilization time, there's no cost, there's none of that. That is irrelevant, because to them, time is money. And it just, as much as we'd like to use the same messaging and materials, you just cannot. You might think that two English-speaking countries should have the same. It is dramatically different. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, no, you really need to understand the drivers of that market, and they're not the same as the drivers of the UK market. And if you go over there with the same messages, I mean, they might speak to you, but you're not going to get anywhere. You need to be speaking to them on the basis to actually drive them. And actually, it's one of the things I love about the US, because it is time is money. They measure everything. So it's quite easy to get economic models that actually, if you've got a product that saves time, saves energy, more productive, you can really demonstrate the value to that market, probably easier than you can in the UK, actually, because they measure everything.
One of my first ever customer in the US actually found me, or us, or my Galaxy retractor, I should say. Didn't Google me, Googled the product, didn't Google me. But they are the perfect example for illustrating this, because they were proactively looking for a more cost-effective product that was readily available, didn't take up a lot of space on the shelf. So they Googled it. It is unheard of for somebody, for example, in the NHS, or in my native Sweden for that matter, can you imagine somebody in theater sitting and Googling for an alternative product? It just doesn't exist unless the product in NHS or in the Swedish healthcare system cannot be found. There's a problem. It's out of stock. Then we'll search for it. But the US version was I am looking for a more modern, better product to increase our OR efficiency. It's just such a different ball game altogether.
It is. So let me take you back a few years. So talk to me about why and why you set up Dune Medical. What inspired you? What motivated you to start this whole process, this whole journey?
So this was an entirely, it was an entire mistake from start to finish effectively. And you will be appalled over my lack of So I had a fantastic job. I worked at a company where I had followed my boss from the job he previously hired me to this new one. And he basically gave me all of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I was loving my job, loving my team, loving all of it. It was amazing. And then I made my first mistake of doing a reasonably good job, because then they gave me Asia Pacific and Latin America as well, which means someone was always awake somewhere, right? And I was traveling so much. That being said, I traveled business. It was very comfortable. I was enjoying myself. It is different when you own the company, I can tell you that. Man, the amount of economy flights I'm taking. I have a funny story about a layover in Miami that I might be able to tell you later if we get to it. But at the time, the company where I was employed was going through some strategic changes, had a change in leadership, a change in strategic direction. And at the same time, we were trying to have our second child. I was on a plane all the time, which is not conducive to conceiving. We were just looking for some changes. So I suggested that since the company decided to take the UK to a distribution partnership, I was quite concerned, because my division was quite challenging, and I wasn't sure that there was a good distributor partner in the UK for it. So after long thinking, I suggested to my boss that I do it, and he said no. Actually, he said no repeatedly. And anyway, long story short, he was like, "You're not going to give up on this one." I'm like, "Nope, you know me well enough." So they took me through the toughest due diligence ever, I think. But then we signed a deal that I was going to be starting a company to be the distributor for the UK. So I moved back to the UK. I was in Amsterdam at the time, started a company. So that was an interesting year. I started a company, got pregnant, moved house, renovated another house, moved country, moved house again, and started setting up my business.
Nice and easy then. Nice and easy, yeah.
Calm. I'm thinking calm. We moved just before Christmas too, which was good in a way. It gave you a good deadline. Can't be. So that was, it was an interesting year. And then a few years in, we were doing really well, built out a solid business. But then I stood behind a surgeon and watched them use an old retractor, and just thought to myself, man, that is not a good one. Watched them actually break it. And yeah, I thought to myself, man. So I asked the nurse, who I knew quite well at the time, I was like, pay for that thing? And she's like, 180 pounds ish. And I said, I'm sorry, for a single use piece of plastic? And she's like, yeah. And I said, I'll find you a better one. And got Googling and tried to find an alternative. Couldn't find one. Interesting, I thought to myself. This sounds like an opportunity. So I thought, well, what if you made one that was less plastic and better price and manufactured closer, so you would have less air miles and all of those good things. So I got drawing. I've always liked drawing, and I've always liked designing things. My mom was a designer, and my dad was a welder and engineer. So I've learned through them that if you need something, you just make it. If it doesn't exist, create it. Both of them ran their own businesses. To me, that wasn't a scary thing at all. I grew up with VAT returns and cookies and milk, basically. So I got drawing, and long story short, we launched the first one in 2016. But I wasn't very happy with it because it wasn't a good design. So I made a better one in 2018. And now Galaxy 2 is, so Galaxy 1, Galaxy 2, and the Galaxy Retractor is now, we've just signed Japan. So it's the 40th country globally. But as you can imagine, that was not the plan I had when I first sat in my office in Amsterdam, thinking about a little distribution company that would keep me from traveling the world, remember?
Yes, exactly.
See
So how
how I
that going?
failed?
Well,
Big failure.
they say necessity is the mother of invention, and it's actually interesting because I'm not going to say nobody goes that route, but lots of people identify solutions for problems that don't actually necessarily exist, and then wonder why their products aren't successful. Whereas you've done exactly what you've actually been sitting there and thinking, actually, there's a better way to do that, isn't there? And that to me is always the best way to develop a product, rather than, oh, I think it'd be great for me, and then you produce it, and then why does no one want it? Well,
yeah, I think you're spot on, but I think that comes back to my pragmatic approach. Like, I don't have an ego. Like, I don't care if it's my idea that wins. I care if it gets better.
Yeah.
And that helps tremendously because nobody gets to. I mean, you read off some amazing achievements, but they're not mine. They're not my achievements. They're the result of a phenomenal team who are experts at what they do, who make up for all my shortcomings. Yes, I might have the vision for where we're going, and I might have the innovative idea, but that means nothing if we don't do it the right way. It means nothing if we can't make the best product that is readily available to surgeons when they want to use it. So the list of accomplishments is not, it's not attached to a person or a product. It's such a result of all those little bits that goes into it. And having a product that is outstanding is not easy, but it helps that it solves an actual real problem, and it helps that it's actually really good, and it helps that I have a team that, quite frankly, don't need me anymore. I think they just keep me around because actually I don't know why they keep me around.
I'm sure there's some valid reasons why they keep you around, Angela.
No, I'm not sure. Our last get together, I made them all do. I don't know if you've seen the TikTok challenge of taking pictures of people while blindfolded, and so if you get caught on the photo, you're out. That's what I made them all do, and so I'm not sure they want to keep me around at all anymore.
Team building. It's tough team building exercise, that.
I had a great picture of one of our newest recruits hiding under a desk. Although in fairness, I did take that one not blindfolded. So yeah, I also cheated apparently on that test. So never mind. Yeah, I'm not sure why they keep me around. Just pity probably at this point.
Well, I'm sure I'll get one of them on, and then they'll be able to tell me, because you're too modest to say it yourself. So. We'll get.
But it's true. They've literally told me this year I am not allowed to start any new companies, and 2025 I'm not allowed to start any new companies, and I'm not allowed to invent anything new because we have not yet launched the next one. It's launching on March 7th, so in 2 weeks. So we haven't launched that one yet even. So I'm not allowed to do anything new until we've launched that one and we've done all the work to get that out and into all the 40 countries for hand surgeons. So yeah.
So you heard it here first, or maybe not, but you heard it here as one of the first. So very exciting.
Absolutely, it is. I'll officially unveil. I've made a product based off of the Galaxy slider because it was used in hand surgery, which looks beautiful. It looks amazing. It replaces assistants and retractors, and it presents a fantastic surgical field. But I was also looking at it going, but what if you did this instead? What if you added that? What if you could do this? So I've designed something entirely new. And this is actually the first one I've ever patented because it's such a unique design to it. So yeah, so I'm going to launch that on March 7th.
Oh, excellent. So we'll look out for that. And just on going back to Galaxy 2, because we're obviously talking about the US, and the US wasn't the first market you went into, and we talked about some of the challenges. But so, what was your plan? Why was the US further down that roadmap for you, as opposed to it's big and shiny, let me go in there immediately?
I think because I don't have anybody pushing me to go to the US market. I don't have anybody. I don't have investors. I haven't taken on any investors, so I am free to make the right strategic choices. And it's a series of events, and it all goes back to that: do the right thing, do the next right thing. I'm quoting Frozen. This is ridiculous, but do the next right thing, right? When you don't know what to do, just do the next right thing. And to me, the next right thing was I've donated quite large amount of retractors to fistula surgeries in Africa, for example. I donated quite a lot of equipment to Ukraine when the war broke out to help in the front line because my retractor can get hurt, so it's a good assistant. So the US wasn't a priority for me for the fact that I didn't feel the need to please an investor or boost my ego or anything like that. There was, however, an opportunity that presented itself because during COVID, the US continued to operate while a lot of countries didn't. So I found myself sitting in my little office in the garden going, what do we do now? So we tried to help out with PPE for a while, but it was just such a nightmare because everything was falsified and certificates were not accurate, and we just couldn't take the risk. So we're just sitting here. So we're like, okay, well, what can we do? So we started realizing that actually Galaxy 2 was a great reduction of staff in the operating theaters, which was then very helpful to reduce infection risk in the US where they were still operating. So that's where we started looking at, can we sell something in the US? And yes, we can, apparently. So it literally started as in, how can we help? What can we do? And can we help in the US market? And yes, we could. So that's how we started. And some really, really big, amazing hospital names that you just sort of heard of or read about are currently customers. And it is an absolute honor.
No, it's definitely exciting when you conceive something, you then produce it, and then people actually validate it by using it and using lots of it.
And they keep buying. One purchase can be a fluke.
Yes.
But repeat orders again and again and again is an absolute confirmation that your product is not just wanted, it's needed. And that, to me, knock on wood, I haven't lost a single customer or account yet. And I launched in 2018. So there is some fantastic feedback coming back to me as an inventor and as somebody who makes something up just because you thought it would be a better idea. It is just beyond ridiculous to realize that that's actually happening. It's a very strange feeling to see that happening. It's quite hard to explain. It's very humbling, and it's such an honor. Such an honor.
I think that if you start from the right place, i.e., you start with a view to try to help people, which I think most people in healthcare are of that mind, then you're making a significant difference. So obviously that just adds a bit more, because there's lots of people who invent different things. And I think the feeling's similar, but it's not the same as when you know that you're actually making a difference to people's health and people's lives. I think that just takes it up that notch, which is obviously why we're in the healthcare game. So in terms of learnings or lessons, if someone came to you and said, right, I'm looking at getting into the US, give me 5 tips or 5 things that you've learned that I shouldn't be doing or I should be doing, what would they be?
Be careful what you wish for is a big one, right? Because I'm in a really fortunate position right now to have a fantastic sales number in the US, but it is very expensive to make lots of stuff. Cash flow becomes a big problem. The payment terms are long. We're quite lucky because we have good payers. We've not had a lot of bad debt, if any. So that's really fortunate, but be mindful with that. But remember that when you take on a big contract, we're talking big. Hospitals in the US are big, and a new user places a stocking order, which is larger than the largest NHS account. So we're talking big, and don't run out of cash is a really big one for me. Be clear on your motives. Why are you wanting to be in the US? Because with big risks comes big reward. Big reward means big risk. So is that what you're up for? Or are you better off elsewhere? The other part I think is crucial is understanding the drivers in the US market. It is not going to be relevant that your product is green or eco-friendly. Don't care. On the face of things, do not care. It's hugely important in many of the European countries where our eco-friendliness is a driver for why they would use my retractor over others. But in the US, that's irrelevant. Everything goes to landfill. Don't care, right? So understand the drivers for your specific product and have a clear line for when you're going to exit. When are you going to say, you know what, this was a good effort, but we're going to call quits on this. We're going to go elsewhere. The US market is not, it might be easily approachable because it's the same language, but it's also not the same language. And maybe I see that clearer. I work, being Swedish, English is my second language and American is my third. So effectively, it's different in so many ways. And it's different per state. So understanding that is really, really important. Maybe pick a state, potentially. You'd never conquer Europe in one go. Why would you conquer America in one go? Why wouldn't you pick one area and then find a winner there?
Yeah.
Win in one place before you move to the next one. Spreading yourself too thin is, and you know what? Worst case scenario, you win in lots of places at the same time and you go bankrupt because you ran out of cash.
Yeah, exactly. Which probably isn't great either.
It's not, because worst case scenario, you've signed a contract that says if you don't deliver, you're not liable. So be mindful of that.
I think and if you were to go back now, if you look at your journey from 2015 to now, what are there any key things you'd say, oh, actually, I'll do that differently?
Well, that's a big question. Are there things I would have done different? It depends on who in my organization you ask. I have given away profits, which potentially put us a bit more on the uncomfortable side than I would have liked. Had I not been so keen on doing good at the same time as we were doing well, I possibly would have sat through COVID with a bit more of a buffer. So that we could have been more comfortable. That being said, we're fine. So all in all, it's hard for me to say do less charity. It's hard for me to say donate less, because I'm very comfortable in my cushy chair in my office, and I know firsthand what happens where my surgeon go. I call them my surgeons because I equip them with product, but I am very aware of what happens when they go and help patients on the front line. So it's very difficult for me to say, no, I'm not going to donate. I can't do that effectively. So I should have kept a bigger reserve So that's certainly one. Another thing I possibly could have done differently was not be such a goody two shoes when it comes to things like UKCA mark,
Okay.
which is now looking like that might be going out the window again. We were early on getting our, I'm Swedish. I like doing my documents right. I like getting the right certification. We were early on an MDR. We were, I possibly did not need to be such a goody two shoes with that. So we could have possibly waited a bit longer to not necessarily get the UKCR mark, because now it looks like we won't need it, etc., etc. So, there's something about being good enough. And I think that's, if anything, good to remember as a student these days, where there's a driver for, get top marks, do the top thing, be the best you can. Absolutely. But recognize what is good enough and don't kill yourself to reach a goal that later on might not be even relevant. So it's enough to be enough, right?
No, in fact, I remember someone very long ago gave me advice when I was a sales rep, actually, and I was saying, I want to be a regional manager. And the advice they gave to me was, well, you don't need to be number one, but you can't be the bottom. Said, if you try and make sure you're always in around the top 10, top 20 of the sales team, then people know who you are, but then you can focus on actually spending that other time that you'd be spending on trying to be number one to grow your skills to be a good regional manager, so that you can actually get that job. And that's probably one of the best pieces of advice I've had, because I remember when I went in, I was thinking, I've got to be number one. I've got to be number one. And they said, no, that's not if you want to be a rep for the rest of your life, fine. But if that's not what your goal is, then leave yourself time to actually develop other skills and other things. And so I think that's a really good concept. And actually, it's a concept that people use very much in the tech field and the digital field, in terms of minimal viable product, rather than allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good.
That being said, I'm failing on that level when it comes to the product, because we set a quite ambitious goal of saying that we want a maximum of X product concerns. But we are not even a tenth of that goal, so our product is potentially, to that effect, a bit too good. But I think that is very important depending on which market you're in. I think for medical device, for me, it has my name on it. It has to be perfect. I can't live with myself if it for some reason is causing an issue. It just, and it's not like it's hard to find me, To your point, I'm everywhere. My face is on the website. It's not hard to figure out who's responsible for Galaxy 2, right? It's, I think when it comes to fast-moving consumer goods and entering the U.S. market, I think you're absolutely right. Get in, get some traction, and get moving, and solve one problem after another. I think that's the right approach. I think for me, conquering the U.S. market, I came from a position of strength. I came with a published clinical study on data from use in 12 NHS trusts of almost 4,000 patients, saying 100% of these surgeons say this is good. So I came with evidence. That goes a long way when it comes to medtech, for sure. So maybe build your evidence and build your confidence as well.
I think what I'm picking up is it's about not rushing it, isn't it? It's as you said there, do the next right thing, as opposed to what's the 15th next right thing, and you're thinking that far ahead, rather than actually let me just do the next right thing, then the next right thing, and you'll build a solid business. And as well as I do, there's some businesses, I'm not going to name any names, that are built on sand, and it looks all shiny from the outside, but you push it a bit and it collapses. And that's never a good place to be. You want solid foundations, you want solid products, you want, as you said, especially when you're talking about healthcare and medtech, you want data, you want evidence, so that you feel confident and your team feels confident to really get behind the product. Because the difference when you see somebody who genuinely believes in a product that they're selling or talking about or marketing, compared to someone who's just as they say, slapping lipstick on a pig is discernible to the person you're speaking to. I think it's
It
very
makes a
clear.
massive difference. And if you can feel proud of what you're doing and you know why you're doing what you're doing, I think that it makes all the difference. And that starts with the founder or the inventor, if you will, in this case. And it goes down to each and every person. I'm so impressed with my team because they jump on every challenge and they will not get. So I'll tell you a funny story. So when I hired my now right hand, I quickly picked up on that this was somebody who had phenomenal organizational skills, absolutely outstanding. So one day I decided to play a prank on her a couple of months in. So I decided, because the first thing this individual did was when they started was to rearrange all the product in lot number order, okay, on the shelf, which I was like, wow, not only do we have them on the spreadsheet, we also now have them in numerical order. Wow. So I was impressed with that. So I decided to play a prank and switch out two of them, literally move them to each other's space. So they were not in numerical order. So I did that on a Tuesday afternoon after they had left the office for the day. And then on Wednesday, I was very pleased with myself. Wednesday morning, I chickened out. So I went into the office before they came back in and switched it back again because I realized they were not going to think that was funny. Then I actually forgot about this. And I told this individual who's now worked with me for 10 years and is my absolute rock and my right hand, who's now pretty much running the business without me. And I told this story at a company event and everybody was laughing their head off, well knowing this individual and well knowing how much that would have upset them. And the funniest thing is I had forgotten to tell them. And when I'm telling the story, I'm looking at them and they are not impressed. They are not pleased and they are certainly not entertained. They're sitting arms crossed and looking at me like, really? You did what? But that's just the kind of dedication and passion you want to have in your team. Like that, they would have not, that is still not funny. They still, to this day, they do not think that's funny. We do know that.
Surrounding yourself with the right people is so critical, and actually enjoying who you work with. I think if you're starting any business,
more time with them than we do with our partners, don't we?
No, yeah, my wife regularly tells me that actually. So yeah, you need to, because I think that's where your enthusiasm, your energy comes from. Because if you're just you on your own, then you can get to a certain level, but you feed off other people's energy, you feed off other people, and other people feed off you. So I think that having that team is a really important part of any success that you're trying to achieve. And you articulated it really well at the beginning when I read out your credentials, and you said, "Well, it's not me. It's I'm a small part of the big jigsaw puzzle." And I think that in itself is inspirational leadership, which will be why you've got a great team around you, which is why your team has been so successful. Those sort of things don't happen by chance. They happen because you've got somebody in place who can identify that and actually work with it and then push them forward. And I think, although we joked about at the beginning, without speaking to your team, I'm pretty positive that would be one of the things they feed back about. Well, this is why we want Angela still to be around. It's not always about, functionally you're doing things that they can't do. It's about the atmosphere. It's about the inspiration. It's about that vision which people buy into.
You say that, but I suspect that you call them and they'll be like, Angela who? Nah, I haven't seen her for months.
We'll soon see, because when I post this, I'll see how many people from Dune Medical are liking it and sharing it. If there's lots of people, then I'm right. If there's nobody, then you're right.
I'm like, please take her over. Man, can somebody else take over? It's hard work. Too many ideas. Too many innovations.
So I'm going to ask you one last question. If you could leave our listeners with one practical piece of advice on leading a business, actually, and we talked a bit about it now here, with clear values and vision, because I think that's what leads to success. What would that advice be? What would be your parting words for my audience?
Make a choice whether you're going to part ways with your ego or use it to the best of its ability, because your ego can be your biggest win or your biggest downfall. For me, I've parked it. I don't have one, so I don't care. But I can also see that having a great ego can bring you really far, because that will be the resilience that you need when things don't go your way. So make a decision, park it or embrace it, but make a conscious decision about how you're going to lead and who you're going to be. The higher you get, the windier it gets, the more influential that's going to be. And you've got to decide on whether you're going to lead your ego or your ego is going to let you.
Oh, well, a very profound way on which to end the podcast episode. Embrace or part your ego.
And if there's one more thing to say, I think, don't ever ask your friends. Don't ask your friends for people you know. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. Everybody's going to want to buy your product if you ask them in theory. Ask the people who have no reason to be nice to you. That's what you know. Same thing for your ego, right? Don't ask people who want to be nice to you.
On that note, thank you very much. I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate the time. And I found it very, very illuminating. And I know that my listeners and viewers will too. So thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Angela, for coming onto the show and spending some time with us to talk about your road to success with the Galaxy 2 and with Dune Medical, and the things that really, really resonated, which if you don't listen to anything else, take away. So if you are a healthcare company or a medtech company and you're trying to get into the US, be careful what you wish for, because big rewards lead to big risks. So keep that in mind whenever you go into any market, but specifically the US. And don't forget to pick up the show notes over at thesalesaccelerationformula.com/podcast-show-notes. You'll also find an option to subscribe to our mailing list so that you can get notes for every single episode straight to your inbox. While you're at it, don't forget to tune in to next week's episode of my new 5 in 5 series, where I share 5 actionable takeaways in just 5 minutes from this episode, which will help you supercharge your business growth. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who might find it valuable. Most importantly, keep the feedback coming so we can keep improving and bringing you more of what you love. Thank you very much for tuning in. And remember, keep listening, keep growing, and keep thriving.